Welcome to Top Floor, the podcast where we amplify discussions with CEOs and chief executives driving the future of small and medium-sized businesses. Get it ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as we delve into the unique minds and journeys of these leaders shaping tomorrow's business landscape. I am your host, Dr. Krista Crawford. In addition to being an adjunct professor for 2 university MBA programs, I'm a Vistage chair. I coach leaders in peer advisory groups and in one-to-one executive sessions to make better decisions that lead to better businesses and better lives. My guest today is Ian Siegel, the CEO of Streamline Learning. According to his LinkedIn profile, he is on a mission to transform education. Join me on this ascent to the top floor. Ian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
First and foremost, tell me a little bit more about what Streamline Learning is about.
Sure. Streamline Learning offers one-on-one virtual test prep tutoring, primarily for SAT and ACT prep. So we work with a lot of high school students throughout the Baltimore area, primarily. That's where we started out. Since COVID, we turned virtual and primarily serve the Baltimore area, but are definitely getting clients from the DC and Florida, California, and some clients.
So you're primarily in the greater Baltimore area. Any thoughts of expanding even farther and farther, making your drop in the puddle bigger and bigger?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that as many people know, it seems as if standardized testing is becoming part of college admissions, or less of a test optional thing, at least at elite schools, it seems. And because of that, and I think because of what the colleges say about grade inflation, I do see the market increasing in that direction. And I'm very interested in the future that is paralleling this development, which involves artificial intelligence and that becoming part of tutoring more and more. So I think that I think that there's definitely an opportunity there. I think that testing, a lot of people have conflicted relationships with testing, and I'd be the first one to say, as our experience with our clients, a lot of people will come to us saying that they're bad testers. So I think that we are hoping to find a way to help people really see that there's no bad test taking gene, and that with these tests coming back, that there's a real opportunity to work with the tutor to see and to kind of understand yourself as a learner, and recognize how testing is one thing, but just for any learning experience that's challenging, SAT and ACT are definitely some tough ones for a lot of students. I think that we're really excited to expand into new places with kind of the idea that testing isn't really as bad as you might think, as long as you have the right experiences. And we find that we don't want to let go of the one-on-one connection, and build. We're excited about AI kind of supplementing that idea.
Seems like everyone I talk to, AI comes into the conversation. It's, we're all on that learning curve. It's still very steep. I will have to say that you're talking to my heart, in that one of the other hats that I wear as an educator, and you are training. I teach at the graduate school level, but you are training those people that will ultimately, hopefully, be students that I might serve. So thank you very much. I will also confess that through the various schools and programs that I went through, I was always much better at qualitative responsives than those quantitative A, B, C, D, E. So I would have put myself in the poor tester category as well. So for anyone listening, you can survive. So tell me, you also state that you are a serial entrepreneur in education, cracking the code on expert, scalable, skill-based instruction. Tell me what you were doing at, let's say, 13, 14, 15. Did you always see this path in your future, or what did you think you would be back then?
So my mom jokes that when I was a child, I had an invention box that I created, and I would be creating inventions serially. I remember, maybe I got the idea from those like there were things, but I created a juice box headband, and I remember goggles for when you're cutting onions. When I was in first grade. I think that since then, I mean, I was always good at school. That's what came naturally to me. And I feel that innovation within learning is the most exciting thing that can happen these days, because I think problems that society's up against are big. And I think that changing ourselves as learners is really essential to making big changes and thinking about that first. So I got excited about that, and everything. So I just, as I saw problems in the I guess 12 years of Streamline's history, I tried to address them, and I failed at some level, but also learned and realized that each failure was kind of the reason why it was a failure was it's because it's a bigger piece of a larger puzzle that needs to be solved. And so, for example, early on, I realized that students really are not reading enough, and also not getting necessarily the experience that they need within reading that are most valued in the SAT and I would say in college. So usually, just very simply, having close reading exercises about nonfiction like that seems to be that a lot of students need more immediate feedback on that idea, and really get a kind of a sixth sense for persuasive writing, for example. So we create Smarty Reader that becomes Smarty Prep, because we realize, oh, if you're going to create the reading solution, you need to do math also. That we then turn to partner with the Players Philanthropy Fund in Baltimore to create a nonprofit with it, or help partner with them to create a nonprofit to create Smarty Scholars, which was a nonprofit dedicated to helping students from disadvantaged backgrounds have the same opportunities that their wealthier counterparts had. And at one point, had enough funding that we basically were able to pay them to. It was like an inverted situation where they were paid to prep, and had a lot of coverage in the Baltimore Sun and Washington Post about our efforts on that front. But and these days, I'm really interested in the brain, and specifically neuroimmunology. That kind of like, especially COVID having happened, my own experiences with Lyme's disease and sick building syndrome, and just uh, recognizing how the performance part of learning is often undermined by just like simple things in society that are just undermining our most kind of sensitive organ in our body. And so I've been paying attention to those realities more and more. Everything from indoor air quality that the White House has talked about, to kind of the food we eat and the sleep we get. To me, those it's just a natural kind of cause and effect pattern for me of like, I see more problems to address, and it seems like post COVID syndrome or things like that might be impacting some students' performance, and more than we realize. I think because my I have a unique vantage point as in being very aware of whether someone's learning or not, and being very aware of their potential to learn and what kind of gap that might be. So that's my latest kind of inquiries around kind of chronic neuroinflammation and its impact on learning and performance. So I'm hoping to do some research and innovation in that on that front. Maybe some innovation around EEG technology is where I'm really excited. I think just more data of what children are experiencing on a neurological level would be so empowering, because I do think that there's a lot of guesswork on just like how students are learning or whether they're learning, and standardized tests are a it's what people say is kind of the best we got going now, but they're not that great. So uh, so I hope that kind of gives you a sense of my entrepreneurial spirit. There are many other things that I'm not going to talk about that are just, but I'll just mention a few passions: natural building, sustainable building. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in. Uh, I'm waiting for the opportunity to start my next business, basically. But it is always. I find myself coming back to learning as a central theme of anything that I get excited about entrepreneurially, even though there is some of the most challenging, businesses to pitch to investors.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you being vulnerable and mentioning your experience with Lyme disease, because I'm sure there are many listeners that are overcoming, illnesses that do impact our neurofunctioning. We're all human, we all have issues. And so I really appreciate you bringing that forward. And any tips for learners who may be listening, if they're struggling, no matter what it is, to help with focus? Have you got some tips you might provide them?
Focus in particular. So I'm interpreting that question as, if someone is struggling with focus and may have ADHD as kind of baseline idea. I would say that ooh, that I don't have like a quick zinger in terms of fixing everything for ADHD, unfortunately. I do say, so let me start by what I think is most important on down in terms of giving yourself the best kind of shot on a focus front. One, I do think anyone who has ADHD should be thinking about inflammation and lowering their inflammation. So in any way possible, because um, the conversation typically with ADHD or any of anxiety, autism, and I throw all these together because these are all kind of brain on fire diseases. Kind of inflamed. The inflammation is a large part of all of these conditions, I would say. But the conversation always starts with, oh, how do I cope with it? You know what I mean? And I want to start that's important, but I want to start the conversation like a step earlier to think about, well, what can I do to give my brain some more space here, and not be so self-judgmental when it's my brain feels like it's going a little haywire, because what I notice with students is that the self-judgment on top of things happening that are negative, let's say like, oh, I have a problem on the SAT that's making me feel uncomfortable. I don't know what it is, or it's this third one I've done, and by now, that's made me feel uncomfortable. By now, I'm starting to question whether I'm smart or not, right? And it's actually that secondary worry about being ADHD that can cause an increase of symptoms, right? In the sense that it's like extra stressors, right? And really what the idea is to lower stressors as much as possible. So anti-inflammatory diet, exercise, the basics, clean air, clean water, clean food, all that's really important. And I would say I was stressed that as my big thing that people keep ignoring that can just do so much to improve your ability to just stay with it. I think the other thing is that, and I also want to say that, like, when you have ADHD, you find yourself apologizing to everybody. I'm sorry I'm late. I'm sorry this happened, right? And again, it's a social stressor, but also I do find people with ADHD um, tend to be charismatic enough to get away. Just, oh, I love that person. You know what I mean? Like, so it's fine anyway. But in terms of specific strategies, I think you get down to recognizing that if you want to find the best part of the day to do the thing that's most important, and so you find the time when your brain feels the best, and at least you get that one thing done and you can build on that. And I think like anything more than saying that, in terms of things to do. And I would just focus on one thing to change. If you will, out of all of the things I mentioned, diet, exercise, blah blah blah, start with that. See if anything naturally kind of comes of that. Because again, oh, here's this list of things I'm supposed to do and I'm not doing. Extra stressors back to more symptoms. So I think
Right. Yeah.
that just being aware of the reality of like how stress plays into exacerbating ADHD is in itself, I think is really important.
So what I heard is that take control of the things that you can take control and be a little more kind to yourself and set up the right time and space. Make space for what you need to do. That was really helpful. Thank you so much. So tell me, open up your looking into the future glasses or your crystal ball and tell me, where is the industry, the education industry heading? What do you see next? What's the next thing to come?
Well, I think this might sound a little controversial but I do see this happening, and not everyone's going to love hearing this, but I do feel like that as AI changes and evolves over the next even 3, 4, or 5 years, um, very likely the middle market of tutoring will drop out, is my anticipation, because there's a level of uh, it's tough to find the convenience and value proposition and price point within one-on-one tutoring and the experience level of the tutor that all makes everything go, especially just especially outside of like test prep. That's very like, we just want to set our child up for the best possible situation. So like if it's kind of just, any kind of tutoring outside of that, which I would think is very valuable, there's a level that AI could be so much more turnkey, and that works better with school in my experience. So
So
that they
what, so if I am a tutor in the mid-market, what should I be doing? Something we hear often when we have AI speakers is that it's not that AI is going to take your job away, it's that those people who don't know how to utilize AI may be looking for a different industry. So if you are a mid-market tutor, what should you be doing right now?
so I think there are a couple paths forward. One is imagine anything you can do to empower the AI. So content creators, things like that, people who can go into to make this system more efficient and really put a human touch on this. I think outside of that, the path that I'm following is more recognizing that I think a lot of people kind of the way that most test prep companies will try to differentiate themselves is around like how much they know the test, their track record. They're easy to connect with. But for me, the learning experience for the tutor is the student really understanding how someone learns and really kind of recognizing the psychological components of that, and recognizing the co-regulatory kind of aspects of tutoring that allows someone to get to baseline to actually entertain something that's uncomfortable. And so like I think there's a level of I, unfortunately, because of like education is focused on the thing and not the student. So there's going to be a lot of development necessary on kind of like knowing the student, and but that's well worth it in my experience, and just in terms of results, because like I mean, like when I talk about streamline, I think all our staff, we know the test back and forth. That's the easy part for us. The complication is the student and their psychological kind of realities around learning, because usually, it's like there's just a basic. One example is that in school, a lot of students are kind of indirectly trained to hide what they don't know, right? Because that what they don't know leads to bad grade, right? And
Right,
so
right.
and imagine how frustrating it is for a tutor who's just trying to find what the student doesn't know quickly so that they can help as fast as possible. So there's a level of kind of being more aware of aspects of integration around learning, like really making learning part of someone, not just conceptually, oh, I know this and then it's gone, which seems to be a lot of students kind of trained way of learning in the kind of unit tests, next class unit tests kind of learning, and really like capitalize on the shift of in terms of like how is this, what can get this student to learn at their pace, like at their cognitive potential, not the kind of oh, two steps forward, one step back that I usually see until students get out of their own way. So I think where it's really valuable. And I also see a potential merging of learning and psychology in that aspect. And there's so many students who have therapists these days, especially among our population of students. And I think it's great for everyone to seek out help in that respect. I really feel like a student, there's a way you can merge psychology and learning all into one and help someone, live action approach something that's really challenging, and that's where everything comes up. All the we're secondary therapists as SAT coaches during that stressful time in a kid's life. And so I see more kind of this merging of psychology, learning, and the brain, and I'm hoping to be right there for it.
Thank you so much. Just going to segue and change topics just a little bit. I'm always interested in what business leaders or who are you reading now that you would recommend, or a book that you think the listeners would be interested in?
Traction helped me get my act together. I would definitely recommend that book. It's just, I think, if you have a complicated business, right, and you think you're smart, there's this need or this draw to complication, and I complain about that with my smart students all the time. I'm like, it's about these blue collar things that you really need to focus on. That's going to make the difference, not this white collar kind of heady idea complication that you're drawn to, and remember more, right? And so guilty as charged right here. So I think that keeping it simple and remembering that the more complicated you make something, it also requires a theory of mind level of thought process, meaning like not just me thinking through, experiencing this process, but, five other stakeholders that, experiencing it and what their lives are like. And I think there's a little bit of, just I notice in myself, and I think that it's easy to fall into a pattern of just assuming rather than really doing the work of thinking through the operations of how everyone might be involved, especially in something as complicated as improving on the SAT, which really takes a lot to like reliably make that happen for students. So I think you imagine like the neurological stressors, like there's already a lot of complications. So you kind of just are hoping that the processes are great, and you can't do that. And so I think Traction would be a great book.
And for those who haven't read Traction, you take goals and you basically break them down into doable steps, and you build in accountability along the way. Is that a fair summary of Traction?
Yeah, very clear definitions of who, what seat on the bus everybody's on, and very clear cadence around moving rocks, which are, goals and all of that. So it's just and really clear processes for everyone to follow, and making and just making no assumptions on those fronts, and also kind of realizing that you don't need to jump into an investment situation if you really want to just get a great business down. So I recommend that first and foremost for anybody.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I want to give you some time. What is it that I haven't asked you, either about you personally or about your business, or something that you feel we need to talk about, or would be helpful if you shared with the listeners?
Well, I'm a passionate advocate about brain health, and I won't stop talking about it because I do notice when push comes to shove on the SAT, kids these days, they're I'm realizing they don't feel like they're using their entire brains. Let's just say that they're like they feel kind of as everyone knows, really under stress. So I think that I kind of want to just reiterate a point I made earlier around kind of recognizing this overall idea around learning, which is that when we want to learn something, our first thought is to buckle down and study hard. But I think that our first thought before that is to create the environment for your brain to excel in that situation, which means lowering other neurological stressors. And and so like I just want to send that message out because I just see these kids who look beleaguered so often by the stressors that they're experiencing across the board. And I don't want to see, 15-year-olds going on 80. And I feel like that there's I hope that tutoring can be considered as not just like a supplement to school, but the main course. Because if it is the main course, so many students that I've seen, and hundreds that we've worked with, I, I'm I'm convinced. I mean, you can look at the two sigma study that shows that tutoring kids outperform classroom bound, excuse me, kids who experience tutoring outperform classroom bound kids by 2 standard deviations. And what that translates to is free time for children. If they were just getting tutored and being able to like play and do projects outside of that, I really think it would be a lot faster. So I am kind of praying for a world where we 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 within learning at least we stop we stop stopping at superficial efficiency, in terms of how far we think, and get toward efficacy. What really turns the dial? Because what we saw through COVID was just that everyone just got shoved back into the system, and hey, you're going into the next grade. A lot of students not having the skills for the next grade. And in reality, this is just something that was more brought to light that was has been always a problem, especially in inner city Baltimore, for example, right, where these kids are like, unfortunately, each year not showing up with the skills for the next year, but we don't know what to do with that situation. We can't hold everybody back. So I really think that like that's when we have to say, a one-on-one situation, basically, if that can get going somehow, it really solves all the other problems of institutional kind of like how do we, make sure it works for every kid somehow, right? It's like, well, if they have a tutor, that tutor will, and you don't have to worry about it. And it's that leap that I think is very scary because it's not like anything we've done before. But I'm telling you, based on what we see as a result, and we're called magicians. It's like, well, no, we are capitalizing on something that Socrates, helped us understand a long time ago. And that's it works. Ask people questions, get to know their perspectives, and that helps that student create, not just learn things, but develop self-awareness and multi-perspective analysis in the process of doing so. And I think that's what's missing, aside from the fact that it's just faster. You can cater it to what each kid needs. So I hope and pray we will think about this and actually rip the band-aid off and make bigger investments along these lines, because I mean, when you invest in learning that way, I mean, it's just the payoff is insane. Like I feel extremely lucky to have experienced so much one-on-one tutoring as the tutor, just because of the multi-perspective learning that I've been able to experience. I don't take it for granted 1 second.
Ian, we are out of time. I want to wrap up with saying, you called to my heart. Socratic method. As a graduate instructor and as a Vistage chair, I ask questions with people like you. So I live that model. I hear your passion. It makes me feel great about the future for those high school students who are wanting to seek higher education, if that's the path they want to go, or at least get to know how their learning process works and have a better opportunity for that. That is the conclusion of this episode of Top Floor, where serial entrepreneur in education, Ian Siegel, has shared some of his wisdom. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Krista.